In NASCAR's 75-year history, there have been many numbers come and go. On any given weekend, you will see 36 to 40 unique numbers on the track, and each of those numbers has a story to tell. Hi, I'm your host Matt, and this is NASCAR Number History, presented by Dogleg Media. In this series, we look to tell the stories of each of those numbers. Who won with the number first, who found victory lane the most, and every other driver to grab a trophy in the number. We go in numerical order, and today we explore every number in the 80s. If you missed numbers 1 through 79, the Number History playlist will be linked below. But with that out of the way, let's dive into some more NASCAR number history. And we start this one out with the 80. A lot of people thought I was crazy to do the 80s all in one video. It certainly seems like there's a lot here, and while yes, there are 114 total wins between these 10 numbers, 2 of those 10 account for 103 of the 114 wins. The majority of the 80s haven't had the luck that many expect from this set, so let's get this thing started. The 80 has one win with one driver. It's competed in 239 total races with a 0.4 win percentage. The first to drive the 80 would be Roscoe Thompson at Daytona Beach to start the 1950 season. Roscoe would win 6 races during his time in the Cup Series, but this would be his only start in the 80. And then we move to the only winner. And I thought I was mentioning Bobby Allison a lot to start this series, but man, this guy keeps showing up as well. The only winner for the number 80 would be Jim Paschal. He would will it to its only victory to date at Martinsville in 1953. And spoiler alert, he isn't done in this episode either. The man has 25 Cup Series wins, and it's starting to seem like he got those wins with about 15 different numbers. And then we move on to honorable mentions. And with only 239 total Cup Series starts for the number, the honorable mentions portion is a bit thin for this one. But that didn't stop some viewers from coming up with a unique mention. Fan, Kurt, and the Hunter from Discord all suggested a fellow NASCAR content creator, Michael Emroots, for his signature 80 car in his gaming videos. Michael was kind enough to send me a great shot of one of his rides, and this is a great mention for a number with not a lot of Cup Series history. If you haven't checked his content out, his channel will be linked below. Thanks again, guys. And then Scott, Divine, Kyle, and Impact all suggested Eric Almirola. Almirola is the last driver to pilot the 80 in the Cup Series, with his lone start coming in 2007 at Las Vegas for Joe Gibbs Racing. This would also be Almirola's first ever Cup Series start. Great mention. And the Tombstones return once more. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, or good news if you like tombstones, but there will be a lot of them in this one. We already discussed that Eric Almirola was the last to drive the 80 in the Cup Series with his start in 2007 at Las Vegas. The number has never had a full-time driver start every race of a season, and that's not surprising considering its few amount of races. When will this number come back and attempt to break a 70-year-long winless drought? And then we move on to another number that barely escaped the status of winless. Let's jump into the 81. The 81 has one win with one driver. It's competed in 300 total races with a 0.3 win percentage. The first to drive the 81 would have been a contender for coolest names if this number hadn't grabbed its lone win. Pappy Ho would make the number's first start in 1950 at Vernon. I love the name Pappy. It gives off moonshiner vibes for sure. He would make 21 total starts from 1950 to 1955, and while never winning, he would collect 7 top 10s and would even grab a pole position as well. And then we move to the only winner, and here's a first for the series. We have a winner who doesn't have any known photos. The only driver to ever take the 81 to victory lane would be Danny Graves with his win at Sacramento in 1957. Graves would only make 9 career starts, which was enough to etch his name as a winner in the Cup Series, but apparently he didn't show up for picture day. And then we move on to honorable mentions. It seems like a lot of people remember this one. Saint, Regera, Maddox, Jacob, John, Ace, and CCS all suggested Jeffrey Earnhardt's 81 that he would run in 2019 at Talladega. He would be involved in Kyle Larson's wreck in the race that would result in him flipping. This would be his only start in the number. And then Divine, JP, NL, Austin, Young Money, and Dice from Discord all suggested Elliott Sadler's Joe Gibbs ride in 2013. He would only make one start in the number, at Kansas, but this paint scheme was nice. This is a great mention. Thanks, guys. And then Revered, Saint, Stephanie, and Impact all suggested Kenny Wallace's Square D car. He would run the number from 1995 to 1998 for Philmar Racing. I always liked Kenny, so this is a great mention as well. And as far as current drivers, we have tombstones galore, and as far as the eye can see. We've already mentioned both the last to drive and the last full-time driver. Jeffrey Earnhardt's start at Talladega in 2019 would be the last time the number would see the track. And Kenny Wallace was the last full-time driver to pilot it for an entire season, doing so in 1998. Another almost 70-year-long winless drought for a number, and it doesn't look like that will change anytime soon. And then we get to our first winless number, and this one has some weird stats. Like, way too many top 5s for it to not have a win. Let's dive into the 82. The 82 has competed in 349 total races with 41 top 5s. It's collected 5 pole positions and 30 lead lap finishes. And right off the bat, we have the best finish the number has ever had. And while another driver would achieve this finish as well, it's crazy to think that it happened in the first start for the number. Hall of Famer Fireball Roberts would first pilot the 82 in the Cup Series, and he would bring it home second in 1950 at Darlington. This would be a massive field. With 75 cars entering the race, Fireball would start 67th, making his way through the field to finish second in the number's first ever race. He would, however, finish 9 laps down. Man, the early days of NASCAR were wild. And as previously mentioned, the 82's best finish is second, and Fireball Roberts would achieve it in the number's first start. Joe Eubanks, the driver to make the most starts in the number, would grab 4 second place finishes in his time with the number. It's a bit tragic that the 82 has finished second 5 times without ever seeing victory lane. And then on to honorable mentions. Divine, NASCAR 23, Maddox, and Jacob all suggested the last to drive the number. Scott Speed. The Red Bull cars will always have a spot in my heart, and I hope that they will come back to the sport sometime soon. Solo, Regera, and Young Money suggested a funny mention with this one, mentioning Trip Murphy, the driver of the 82 Cheetos car in the movie Herbie Fully Loaded. And don't roast me for this, but I've never seen a Herbie movie. Let me know down below if I need to change this. Thanks for the mention, guys. And hiding the hidden trivia question in a tombstone is way too obvious. I definitely won't do that for this video. And as discussed before, the last to drive the 82 would also be the last full-time driver the number had, Scott Speed. Speed would complete 2 full seasons with the number at Red Bull Racing in 2009 and 2010, with the number's last start coming in 2010 at Homestead. This number deserves a win. This is the Mark Martin of numbers, finishing second so many times but never bringing home the trophy. And then we get to another one of my beloved Red Bull numbers. And hey, this time I get to talk about a win for the sponsor. Let's jump into the 83. The 83 has 2 wins with 2 different drivers. It's competed in 644 total races with a 0.3 win percentage. And this number is starting off with a tongue twister of a name, as Tommy Thompson would first pilot the 83 back in 1951 at Daytona Beach. Thompson would finish 12th in a field of 55 cars, so it was a pretty solid day at the office for the number's first day on the job. Thompson would win 1 race in his career, and a number previously discussed in the series. Who remembers what number that was? The first to take the 83 to victory lane would be Lake Speed at Darlington in 1988. A super awesome name, this would be the numbers and Lake's first win. For Speed, this would be the only win of his career. Lake would make 402 starts in the Cup Series. He was around for a while, a career that spanned from 1980 to 1998. And the last time the number would go to victory lane, it would have an incredible paint scheme and sponsor attached to it. Brian Vickers would take the Red Bull Toyota to victory lane in 2009 at Michigan. This would be the second win for Vickers, and the second win for the number. While Vickers would eventually claim a 3rd win, the 83 is still waiting for its 3rd. And have I mentioned how bad I want Red Bull back in the sport? Maybe SVG can convince them to come over with him when he ultimately comes to Cup full time. And then on to honorable mentions. TNKL, Shirky, K, Oki, and Regera all suggested Matt DiBenedetto's 83 machine at BK Racing. DiBenedetto would get his Cup Series start with the number, and would pilot it during the 2015 and 2016 seasons with the team. And then Titan, Divine, Rezi, Salt, and Ace all suggested Landon Castle. Some mentioned him for his 55 years of Burger King scheme, and then others mentioned the famous first rule in stock car racing quote that he had in response to an incident with Danica Patrick. Great mentions. And see, I told you I wouldn't put the hidden trivia on a tombstone. It's just way too predictable, and y'all probably just skimmed through the video looking at all the tombstone text. I know your games. The last to drive the 83 would be Joey Gase in 2017 at Homestead, and the last full-time driver to compete in every single race would be David Rudiman in 2013. While DiBenedetto would run the majority of the races in 2015 and 2016, other drivers would share the seat as well. I like the 83, and if it brings Red Bull back to the sport, I'm all for it coming back. And now we move to a number that brings a lot of joy and heartbreak to me for recent reasons. It's the 84. The 84 has competed in 225 total races with 11 top 5s. It's never earned a pole position, and it has 23 lead lap finishes. The first to drive the 84 would be Robert Caswell in 1951 at Oakland. And much like the 82, Caswell would get the number's best finish in its first race, finishing second. He would make 6 total starts in the Cup Series, with 3 of those coming in the 84. And we already talked about the best finish for the number, as Caswell would get the number's only second place finish. So let's jump into honorable mentions. Titan, Stephanie, Kyle, JK Speed, and Coke all suggested Kyle Busch for his part-time schedule in the 84 during the 2004 season. This is an awesome scheme, and Hendrick would run this number for the same reason Jimmy Johnson runs it today. It's the 48 backward. Hendrick was able to do this scheme right though, with the correct font and color, a proper 84. Great mention. Kristen, Titan, and Jacob all suggested Jimmy Johnson, my favorite driver. It's so weird seeing him in anything other than the 48. His time in the 84 has been anything but good. Mechanical issues at Charlotte, getting dumped at Coda, and well, Daytona things happened at Daytona. I will always cheer for him while on the track, even if he is in a Toyota next season. And then Dice, Divine, and Christian all suggested AJ Allmendinger. Red Bull schemes are always welcome. Allmendinger would pilot the 84 for Red Bull Racing in 2007 and 2008. He would fail to qualify in his first 6 attempts with the car. This was due in large part to Toyota entering the Cup Series fresh, with all the inaugural Toyota teams struggling heavily. And then on to the current driver. We don't have a tombstone for once. Although the current driver doesn't race full-time, it is seeing the track this season with Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy would make the 84 his number for a limited schedule in 2023, and it's already confirmed that he will make select starts in 2024 as well. I am entirely too optimistic that Jimmy can get win number 84 in the 84. This would also be the number's first win as well. Of course, this won't happen, but a man can dream, right? And now we're halfway home for the 80s, and the best is still to come. Let's dig in to the 85. The 85 has 2 total wins with 1 driver. It's competed in 141 races, which is the fewest for the 80s and 6th fewest all time, and it has a 1.4 win percentage. The driver who first piloted the 82 would also be the first to bring the 85 to the track. Fireball Roberts would drive the 85 first in 1951 at Daytona Beach. This would be the only start for Fireball in the number, where he would crash out early, finishing 45th out of 55 cars. And there's only ever been 1 winner in the 85's history. Emmanuel Zervakis would get both of the number's wins in 1961. The first would come at Greenville, and the last for the number would come at Norwood. And a fun fact about Zervakis, he would win at Wilson Speedway in 1960, which should have been the number's first win. He would, however, later be disqualified for having too large of a fuel cell. This disqualification was the last time a winner was disqualified until Denny Hamlin and subsequently Kyle Busch would be disqualified at Pocono in 2022. It's hard to believe that we went 62 years without a winner being DQ'd, but we did. And then on to honorable mentions. We're a little light on the honorable mentions for the 85, but we did have one really good one. Let's check it out. Blode, Impact, and Divine all mentioned Darrell Waltrip. Waltrip would make his last Cup Series start in the Mansion Motorsports 85 at the 2000 Coca-Cola 600. This is a great mention for a Hall of Famer and champion of our sport. And then back to the tombstones. Y'all miss them, I can tell. The last to drive the 85 would be an honorable mention from Zach, Carl Long, way back in 2002. And there has never been a driver compete in every single race of a season with the number. Previously mentioned Emmanuel Zervakis would compete in all but 3 races in the 1961 season. He would ultimately come home third in the standings, and who knows, if he had ran those other 3 races, he may have been a champion. The 85 is a cool number. Someone should definitely give it some love sometime soon. And then we move on to the 86. The 86 has 1 win with 1 driver. It's competed in 320 total races with a 0.3 win percentage. The 86 would first appear in NASCAR's first season, at Langhorne in 1949. Harvey Hillegas would start 31st and finish 25th in the number's first race. And this guy doesn't have much information online about him at all. I couldn't even find a black silhouette for him. He only made this 1 start and then was never seen again. And our only winner for the 86 would be a Hall of Famer, Buck Baker. Baker would take the number to victory lane for its only trip in 1961 at Hartsville. We will be hearing about Baker again very soon. for the number he would find most of his success with. And then on to honorable mentions. We had quite a few viewers mention this guy, and it's a pretty solid mention. Toto, Nick, Kristen, TNKL, and Duddle from Discord would all mention Chick Hicks from the movie Cars. The archenemy of Lightning McQueen, Chick would win the Piston Cup, but we all know who really won it that year. And after all, it was just an empty cup. And I have my own honorable mention here as well. A close family friend and one of the most knowledgeable guys I know would make his lone Cup Series start in the 86. Bob Fox would make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at Rockingham in 1984. Bob is the 1987 Winston West champion and would be a racing partner for my family in ARCA. I'm super happy to give Bob the nod here. And then on to the current driver. This number has been lonely for quite some time. It hasn't seen the track since before I was born. Rich Woodland Jr. would be the last driver to see the track with the number, making the number's final start in 1993 at Phoenix. Maybe nobody wants to drive it now because of Chick Hicks. I mean, it's honestly a pretty good reason. We hit our first decently successful number, and most of the credit goes to one man. Let's dive into the 87. The 87 has 27 total wins, with 2 different drivers. It's competed in 782 total races with a 3.5 win percentage. And this number is essentially going to belong to one man. The driver who would make the number's first start is also the driver with the first, last, and most wins. It is none other than Hall of Famer Buck Baker. Baker would make the number's first start in NASCAR's first race at Charlotte in 1949. It would take a few years for him to find victory lane in the number, however. The first win for the 87 would come in 1953 at Langhorne. The last win for the number would come 10 years later in 1963 at Greenville. Baker would also win 2 consecutive championships in the number, claiming the 1956 and 1957 titles. All in all, Baker would win 26 times in the 87. He is a pioneer of our sport and was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2013. And the only other driver to win in the 87 would be a familiar name. It's Jim Paschal. Paschal would grab his lone win with the number in 1954 at Martinsville, and I'm certain Paschal will show up again. It's just a matter of when, not if at this point. And then on to honorable mentions. Dice, Beat Boop, Divine, Regera, and NASCAR 2345 all suggested Joe Nemechek. He would be the last full-time driver for the number and would have some pretty awesome paint schemes along the way. And then Kyle Fan and Glitching suggested Timmy Hill. I heard everybody's outrage when I left Timmy off the list for the 66, and I am making up for that horrible mistake here. Timmy would make one start in the 87 for Identity Ventures Racing in 2014, finishing 41st at New Hampshire. I hope all the Hill fans are happy for this one. And this shouldn't surprise anyone, I'm kind of running out of things to say for driverless numbers. We just mentioned the last to drive the number with Timmy Hill running it in 2014 at New Hampshire. The last full-time driver was also mentioned, with Joe Nemechek running it for the entirety of the 2013 season. The 87 accounts for nearly 24% of all the 80s wins, and the next number has a staggering 67% of the wins for the 80s, and it's a fan favorite for sure. And here it is, the number we've all been waiting for, the famous 88. There is no denying that some big names have called this number home at one point or another, with 4 of the 6 winners being in the Hall of Fame. So let's dive in. The 88 has 76 total wins with 6 different drivers. It's competed in 1,747 races, which is the most for the 80s and 8th most all time, and it has a 4.4 win percentage. The 88 has been in the sport from the very beginning. George Mantooth would pilot the 88 in NASCAR's very first race at Charlotte in 1949. He would finish 26th in the race and would only make 2 career starts, but at least he has a black silhouette. And then we move to the first to win. This guy is the king of the 80s, it seems. Buck Baker would get the 88's first victory as well, winning at Wilson in 1954. So just to recap, he would get the first wins for the 86, 87, and the 88. Surely he isn't the first to win in the 89, right? Baker would ultimately collect 3 wins in the 88, showing he was a true journeyman of the 80s. And the battle for most wins in the number was a close one, but Dale Jarrett would come out on top by 2 wins over Darrell Waltrip. Jarrett would win 28 total times in the 88, driving it for Robert Yates from 1996 until 2006. In this time, Jarrett would win many crown jewel events. He would win the Daytona 500 twice, including winning in his first start with the number in 1996. He would win the Brickyard 400 twice, as well as a Coca-Cola 600. Jarrett's crowning achievement would come in the number as well, winning his only Cup Series championship in 1999. Jarrett would win 32 total times in his Hall of Fame career, with the majority of those coming in the Yates 88 machine. And then on to other winners. First up is Darrell Waltrip. He would be the winningest driver of the 88 until Dale Jarrett would take that crown from him. Waltrip would win 26 times in the 88. He would pilot the 88 from 1975 until 1980 for Dygard Racing. He would win the Coke 600 in back-to-back seasons with the number as well in 1978 and 1979. His Gatorade scheme was one of my personal favorites as well. I really do wish Gatorade would come back to the sport. And while he isn't the winningest driver in the number anymore, he is certainly one of the best to ever do it. Yet another Hall of Famer to win with this number. And speaking of Hall of Famers, we have another Hall of Famer to win, and we haven't mentioned him for a while. It's Bobby Allison. Bobby would collect 8 total wins in his time with the Dygard 88. His biggest win with the number would come in the 1982 Daytona 500. As a matter of fact, all 8 of his wins in the 88 would come in 1982. There's no question that Bobby is one of the greatest drivers our sport has ever seen, and he definitely made his mark on the 88 as well. And besting Allison by 1 win is the 15-time most popular driver, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Jr. would leave his father's team DEI at the end of the 2007 season due to conflicts within the team. He would join forces with powerhouse Hendrick Motorsports in 2008. While Jr. had many different numbers to choose from, he originally was going after the 28. Yates wouldn't let it go, and instead offered up the 88. Jr. would pilot the 88 for Hendrick to finish out his career from 2008 until his retirement in 2017. Jr. would get no bigger win than his 2014 Daytona 500 victory. This is still one of the coolest moments I've seen live, with Jr. winning the 500 10 years after collecting his first Daytona 500 win. Jr. was so good for the sport, and while he wouldn't find a championship, the effect he had on the growth of our sport was monumental. I hope to see Junior Motorsports come to Cup, because you know we will see the return of the 88 if he does. And now we move to the last to win with the number. Alex Bowman would be the last driver to win in the 88, with his win at Fontana in 2020 being the number's last. Bowman would get his first career win in 2019 at Chicagoland with the number. Obviously Bowman is in the 48 now, and the 88 sits dormant, waiting for the next legend to pick it up. And then on to honorable mentions. Reverd, Christian, and Gilmore all suggested Ricky Rudd for his time in the 88. Rudd would actually have 2 stints in the 88, one in 1981 for Dygard, and then he would finish his career out in the 88 for Yates in 2007. This is a great mention, and I really wish the Rooster could have grabbed a win in the number. That would have been super cool. And then Ace, Stephanie, NASCAR 41, and AJ all mentioned Jeff Gordon. Gordon would come out of retirement to fill in for Dale Jr., who had suffered a concussion in 2016 for 8 races. This was really awesome to see Jeff come back, even under these circumstances. And then of course he and a then retiring Tony Stewart would share a special moment at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a place both drivers called home. And then on to the current driver. And this one makes me sad. The 88 is a number that 100% needs to be in NASCAR. Alex Bowman would be the last to pilot the number, as he was the number's last full-time driver as well, with the number's last appearance coming at Phoenix in 2020. Junior needs to bring JRM to Cup, so we can get this number back on the track. It doesn't feel right not having it out there. And we have finally reached the end of the 80s. Man, this one has been a long one. Let's finish this one up with the 89. The 89 has 4 total wins with 3 different drivers. It's competed in 265 total races with a 1.5 win percentage. The first time the 89 would be seen on the track would be way back in 1949 at Langhorne. Al Keller would be the driver, where he would finish 8th in a field of 45 cars. Keller would make 29 total starts in his Cup Series career, and would grab 2 wins in his time, although not with the 89. And alright, this guy is truly the king of the 80s. Buck Baker would get the 89's first win as well, back in 1952 at Columbia. He is also the winningest driver of the number, with 2 total wins. So just to recap, Baker got the first win for the 86, the 87, the 88, and the 89. That is insane. 32 of Baker's 46 total Cup Series wins would come from the 80s with 4 different numbers. If there was a question as to who was the true king of the 80s, that debate has been settled. It is without a doubt Buck Baker. And the only other winner before we get to our last win would be Buddy Schumann. Schumann would grab his only career win in the 89 with his win at Niagara Falls in 1952. And the last time the number would visit victory lane would be in 1960 at the World 600. Joe Lee Johnson, who we talked about last episode, would grab the win. This would be Johnson's last win of his career, which is fitting that it is also the number's last win as well. And then we move on to honorable mentions. Reverd, Sonic, Stephanie, and Kyle all suggested Morgan Shepherd. Shepherd would pilot his famous Jesus 89 machine in select races in the Cup and Xfinity series. There's just something about that green and yellow that works for me. And we've arrived at the last tombstone for this one. And unfortunately, we have even more of them next week with the 90s. Morgan Shepherd would be the last to drive the 89, with the number's last start coming in 2006 at New Hampshire. And there has never been a driver compete in every race for an entire season in the 89. Shepherd would compete in quite a few, but never made the entire season. It's been a while since we've seen the 89. When do you think we'll see it again? And that'll do it for the 80s. And man, that was an absolute marathon of an episode. As always, I'm prone to forgetting drivers. Let me know which drivers of any of these numbers I may have missed for this one. If you haven't seen numbers 1 through 79, the number history playlist will be linked below. Be sure to check them out. We will be back next week tackling every number in the 90s. We are getting close to the end of number history for the Cup Series. It doesn't seem real. If you liked the video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. It helps a ton and I definitely appreciate it. And did you know that 71% of my viewers aren't subscribed, but they are returning viewers? If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Be sure to check out the community tab of the channel. We do cool little giveaways like autographed merchandise and diecast, as well as updates and polls for the channel. You definitely don't want to miss it. And we also have a Discord server. Find the invite in the About section of the channel or in the description below, and come join us over there for even more fun. But that'll do it for us here at Dogleg Media. I'm Matt, your host, and you've been watching NASCAR Number History. I'll see you next time.